The UK is paying a promise it knows will break it. And the worst part? They can't stop. It's a political trap with an expiration date. Every time someone suggests changing it, 12 million retirees vote and the conversation dies. But the math doesn't vote. And the bill keeps growing. And this doesn't stay contained in London, because the money holding this system together is tied to the same markets holding yours up. And to understand how this rope started tightening, we need to look at the exact moment a political fix turned into a mathematical nightmare. It all started in 2011. The British economy was still flat on its back, recovering from the financial crisis. Retirees were losing purchasing power, and an election was coming. Someone in a room in Westminster had an idea that seemed brilliant at the time. What if we legally guaranteed the pension would never fall, no matter the economic scenario, no matter the cost? They called it the triple lock. 15 years later, everyone is still paying for that idea. It guarantees the pension rises every year by whichever is highest among three things: inflation, wage growth, or a guaranteed floor of 2.5%. Doesn't matter if the economy is doing well or badly. The pension goes up, no exceptions. Sounds fair, right? Protect the elderly, keep up with the cost of living. No politician goes on TV and says this is wrong. The problem is what happens when you run that guarantee for 15 years through a volatile economy. Since the triple lock was created, the pension has risen far faster than wages, 14% higher than it would be if it had only tracked salaries. People waking up early to work watched their pay grow slowly. The pension grew faster. In practice, the system is taking money from those producing today to maintain a standard the country can no longer carry. The watchdog that audits the British government's numbers, the equivalent of the Congressional Budget Office, has already sounded the alarm. This mechanism is currently costing £12 billion more per year than it would under simple wage indexation. And looking further out, total pension spending is set to rise by £80 billion by the early 2070s, with more than half of that increase caused exclusively by the triple lock, not by an aging population. The head of that fiscal watchdog was direct. The UK cannot afford the array of promises that are displayed to the public, not the opposition, the government's own auditor. But the triple lock is just the first layer. Because while the pension goes up every year, what it actually pays still isn't enough to cover the basics. A British retiree, 40 years of contributions, pension at the maximum rate, goes to pay the monthly bills, and the money doesn't cover the minimum standard for living with dignity. This isn't a hypothetical. It's what the data confirms. The maximum UK pension today falls below the minimum living standard set for a single retiree, not the comfortable standard, not the moderate one, the minimum. That means the state pension alone doesn't get you there. You need private savings on top, which would be reasonable in theory. Except the Institute for Fiscal Studies spent 2.5 years studying exactly this. The conclusion was uncomfortable. Nearly 40% of private sector workers saving into pension funds are on track to be unable to maintain the standard of living they had while working once they retire. That's 7 million people. 7 million people who believe they're saving for the future but are on a path to a significant drop in living standards when they get there. And 1 in 5 private sector workers isn't saving into anything at all. Not because they don't want to, because the cost of living today leaves nothing left over to think about 30 years from now. A pension that doesn't cover the minimum, 40% of savers on a shortfall track, 1 in 5 saving nothing, and a government spending more and more to keep the triple lock running. But if you think the lack of money is the biggest problem, wait until you see what time is doing to the population itself. It's a math problem that not even printed money can solve. For a pension system to work, you need workers paying in to support those who've already retired. It's a ratio, and the UK's ratio is about to get worse in a way that can't be reversed. The country is running out of young people to pay the bill for the older ones, and the money simply isn't going to reach everyone. Fewer children being born, people living longer, and now deaths outnumbering births for the first time in the country's modern history. The immigration that was compensating for that gap fell by nearly half in a single year. And around a third of the people leaving the UK are between 16 and 34, exactly the ones who should be paying into the system. The result? The ratio of retirees to each active worker will rise from 31 to 47% over the next 50 years, nearly half. A family where fewer and fewer children are born, but the grandparents keep living longer. Someone has to pick up the tab, and in the UK, that someone is getting harder to find. That's exactly the country's situation multiplied across 67 million people. The UK Parliament's own Economic Affairs Committee was brutally honest. The UK is strikingly unprepared for this shock. Not the opposition saying that. The Parliament, and the fund that actually pays the pensions, the National Insurance Fund, could simply run out of money by the mid-2040s. The government has an answer to this problem, but the answer creates a different crisis, and that's where it gets more disturbing. The only lever the government has actually pulled is raising the pension age. The state pension is rising to 67 by 2028, then to 68 by 2046. The logic is simple. If people live longer, they work longer and draw the pension for fewer years. Sounds reasonable, until you see what happens in practice. When the pension age rose from 65 to 66, the poverty rate among 65-year-olds jumped from 10 to 24%. Because a lot of people that age have already left the workforce due to health issues, caring for family members, or simply not finding work. The government says, wait longer. But there's no income to cover that gap. Raising the pension age is a patch that hits hardest on the people with the shortest life expectancy and the least savings, exactly those with no plan B. And reforming the triple lock, the root cause? Every party has promised to keep it. The mechanism the fiscal watchdog says is costing billions more per year than it should, that economists recommend replacing. Every party has promised to preserve it because retirees vote en masse. The lever they can pull hurts people. The lever they need to pull is politically impossible. And this trap doesn't stay contained in the UK. Feels distant. Feels like their problem. But the financial system doesn't work by country. It works by exposure. And the UK's exposure to the rest of the world is enormous. The state pension is the second largest item in the British government's budget, behind only healthcare. When spending that size starts getting out of control, the government needs to borrow more. More borrowing means more bonds in the market. More bonds means higher interest rates to attract buyers. And higher rates in the UK flow into the markets where your bank holds reserves because financial markets don't have borders. In practice, when the UK gets more expensive to finance, credit in other countries gets more expensive too. That shows up in your credit card rate, your car payment, your mortgage rate. Not overnight, but gradually, the way crises always arrive. And there's a parallel that's more uncomfortable than any number. In the United States, Social Security already faces the same problem in slow motion. Fewer young people paying for more retirees, the fund projected to run a deficit within decades. What's happening in the UK right now is the rehearsal. Documented, measurable, already underway. The UK isn't just their problem, it's the first domino, and dominoes don't stop on their own. The UK isn't just in crisis, it's showing what happens when a well-intentioned promise meets a math that stopped adding up. A mechanism built to protect the elderly became a cost the government's own watchdog says it can't afford. The fund that finances the pensions could run dry in roughly 20 years. The demographic shift that should have been managed decades ago wasn't, and now fewer workers are sustaining more retirees in a ratio that gets worse every year. The private savings system has 7 million people on a shortfall track, and the only correction implemented pushes people into poverty without touching the root cause. The triple lock stays because votes matter. The debt rises because the math doesn't vote. But here's what sets the British case apart from an ordinary crisis. Every exit is blocked by another problem at the same time. To fix the triple lock, you need political courage. No party has shown. To fix the demographics, you need decades the system doesn't have. To fix private savings, you need disposable income that the cost of living is consuming. Every door out is closed by another problem. This doesn't break suddenly. It's a system that bends slowly, predictably, documented, ignored until the bend becomes permanent. And when it becomes permanent, the ones paying the bill aren't the politicians who made the promises. It's the next generations. There. And potentially here too. If you want to keep tracking how these failures reach your wallet before they hit the headlines, subscribe. And tell me in the comments, would you accept working until 70 to save your country's pension system, or would you rather let it collapse now?